Good morning, all. Thank you so much for the introduction to this panel. Let us start by acknowledging that the gathering spot for this conference is taking place on the traditional and unceded territory of the Mohawk, Kanengiahaka First Nation, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. Thank you so much to our hosts at the International Economic Forum of the Americas, and special greetings to our guests who have agreed to join us today as panelists and share their unique perspectives and experience related to this important conversation, rebuilding Canada's biomanufacturing and life sciences sector. COVID-19 around the world, the pandemic has highlighted the need for multifaceted and dependable biomanufacturing infrastructure. And this includes large-scale and flexible manufacturing capacity, resilient supply chains, and ambitious biotech innovation. As Canada and other nations are focusing their efforts on recovery from severe human and economic impacts of this global pandemic, one focus is building resiliency in biomanufacturing and the life science sector. This includes supporting the growth of these industries, determining the next generation of solutions for healthcare, and preparing for future pandemics. Canada has an impressive history of achievement in life sciences. However, recent decades have marked a period of decline in some areas of Canada's life science ecosystem. As it rebuilds its biomanufacturing capacity, a prevailing question for Canada is, what are the best avenues for strengthening its life sciences ecosystem when there are multiple priorities and a global ecosystem with competition as well as cooperation? Already, the Government of Canada has mobilized efforts to develop and produce critical vaccines and therapeutics, as well as other essential medical supplies in the context of its COVID-19 mitigation efforts. Building on this, the 2021 federal budget commits $2.2 billion in addition over the next 7 years to support the growth of Canada's life science sector. So, with that background, I'm very excited to be able to join you here today to advance this conversation. This is an important time. I'm certain our panelists will provide valuable insights into what are the most promising opportunities going forward. Before we begin, I'd like to take this chance to introduce our panelists and have them introduce themselves. So we have with us Takashi Nago, and I'll move over to you, Mr. Nago.
Thank you, Dr. Langley. My name is Takashi Nago. I'm CEO of Medicago, Inc. Medicago is a biotechnology, biomanufacturing enterprise headquartered in Quebec City. We use the plant as a factory to express proteins and use that to manufacture. Uniqueness of that is we can respond rapidly to the pandemic like the one that we're facing. The lead project that we're working on is the COVID-19 vaccine, which is currently in phase 3 on the stage of the clinical development. I'm very grateful to the opportunity to participate in this very timely topic as a panelist, and really take this opportunity to thank the sponsor, International Economic Forum of Americas, as well as the Government of Canada, ISCD and PSPC, as well as the provincial government of Quebec for wonderful support that provides for Medicago. Thank you very much, and looking forward to the discussion.
And we'll turn to Stephen Baksha.
Hi, it's great to be with you. I'm based in the north of England. I've been on the UK's vaccine task force for the last 8 months, working as a manufacturing advisor. Prior to that, I was chief executive of Fujifilm Diosynth Biotechnologies, one of the world's leading contract developer and manufacturer of biopharmaceuticals, therapeutics, and vaccines. So it's great to be with you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're about to have.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Jessica Chutter.
Good morning. It's great to be here. I head up the biotech investment banking practice for Morgan Stanley, and I've had the good fortune of growing up with the biotech industry over the last 30 years, starting working with some of the original companies such as Amgen and Chiron in the field. Now we find ourselves, as we'll be discussing, I think, at an extremely exciting time where there's a confluence of advanced science, capital, and experienced people that can come together to have incredible results. During this pandemic, I've actually led over 16 IPOs totaling $4 billion. And we've had, again, the privilege of sponsoring some of the leaders across the spectrum of solutions for COVID in the vaccine arena with Moderna, in the monoclonal antibody arena with Adagio, and in the antiviral area with Atea Pharmaceuticals. I've also had the good fortune of working with a number of leading biotech companies in Canada, including companies such as Repair in the oncology field, Fusion Radiopharmaceuticals, and Clementia with the orphan arena. Thanks very much. Look forward to the discussion.
Thanks so much, Jessica. And turning to Fabian Moreno.
My name is Fabian Moreno. Thank you so much for having me. I'm the Vice President of Industrial Affairs, and I lead all biomanufacturing efforts here in Canada for Sanofi Pasteur, which is the vaccines division of Sanofi. And what an exciting time. I can't wait to see how the discussion goes with the panel. Sanofi's been present in Canada for, there's a long history of more than 100 years. And the last 5 years, we've seen an amazing resurgence in investments with over $2 billion invested. We managed to bring over $2 billion in investment here at the Toronto site. So great time for biotech in Canada. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Fabian. So let's start our questions and responses. And so I'm going to start with Mr. Nagayo. Medicago is now performing important R&D activities while it grows its capacity to be a commercial supplier of vaccines to Canadians. So from these two perspectives, what do you see as Canada's core research and industrial strengths that we can use to revitalize the sector, not just for domestic Canadian readiness, but also for export and international competitiveness in this environment where there are many countries committed to the same objectives? Mr. Nagayo.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the great question. So I'm coming from a bit of an international background and looking at Canada a little bit objectively from a global landscape. I have to say that Canada has a great science going on. I think the wonderful academic and the private partnership, universities like our foundation, we have a good collaboration with Laval University of Quebec, and that was the technology foundation was transferred into Medicago's foundation. Prior to assuming this role as a CEO of Medicago, I was actually at one point of my career was a venture capitalist based in San Francisco Bay Area, looking for the investment opportunities in life science. And I used to come to Toronto, Calgary, and Vancouver, and even to Quebec City to look for the great investment opportunities in life science, and there are quite a few. So I think Canada has a great foundation as an anchor or the originator of the great science. And I don't mean to be self-serving, but our company Medicago, which was founded as I said through the tech transfer from the University of Laval, was indeed identified by the international investors back in 2008. When we're looking for the capital. We are identified by Philip Morris International, which is the global consumer product company, to invest. which has led to the invitation of the more support and capital from Mitsubishi Tanabe Corporation of Japan back in 2013. So with the open innovation and positioning Canada as a global hub of the hub of the global life science ecosystem, I think this country is well positioned to contribute to the life science. One thing, though, that I feel, being the CEO of Medicago, also looking at Canada sort of from the global perspective, is that sometimes we're a little bit stealth mode. We need to be a little more visible globally, even within the American continent. We obviously been covered a lot in Quebec and Canada, but I like to see a lot more visibility, also in the US and Europe and Asia. And don't be shy. But I think given the a unique position of Canada, I think the open innovation is the key word. Partnership with the company globally, really bringing the capital and resources to maximize the wonderful innovation that we have in Canada.
Thank you so much, Takashi. I was interested in your characterization of stealth mode. Some Canadians would call it more shy or modest, but you've picked an important Canadian characteristic. I'm going to turn now to Mr. Baksha. Steve, you bring a really important perspective from your entire career, but most recently on the UK Vaccine Task Force. So preparedness is an idea that has changed in definition, I think, during the pandemic. What does it mean to be prepared for a pandemic or other health emergencies? So that preparedness has to be balanced with accelerating transformative health innovations that will continue to shape the life sciences landscape for years to come. So, Steve, what do you foresee as the lasting impacts of the pandemic globally? And what do you expect will be the impacts in terms of expectations related to the reshoring of critical health industries and international cooperation?
Well, I think it's great listening to Takashi's answer, because in a sense, what he's giving you a live version of is what's happened in the last 18 months. It's important, I think, to remember that this dealing with COVID is at least a 4-year project that we've got underway, and we're not even halfway through it yet. So when you start looking at the lessons learned at this stage, we do have to remember that some of the lessons we're learning now, if we turn the clock back a year, the mood in all our nations was completely different to where we are today. It was, where is the science and where will the science take us? Will the science give us an answer? If you think of the news, September 2020, no vaccine yet in our hands. We were in a position of wondering, would the science actually ever get us out of the lockdowns or the mask wearing or all the restrictions that were on us? And would it actually make an impact on the death rates that we were tragically all being subjected to? If you now roll the clock forward a year, one of the triumphs of this last year has been the science coming through, for no doubt at all. And it's come at a pace that seasoned industry analysts were all taken aback by, and has been more successful, I think, than anyone could have hoped for. Remembering that this time last year, we were saying to ourselves, well, vaccines usually take 8 years. Doing them in 8 months is a stretch. Doing them maybe this time next year, we'll have a vaccine. Maybe it'll be 50% effective. Maybe we were starting to get the first results, but no one could have predicted that the mRNA vaccines would be so effective and that the adenovirus vaccines would be so effective against COVID. And so I think that the first lesson learned, if you like, and the thing that's changed us forever is this sense that the old way of developing drugs and vaccines, that was a series of events that would take after each other. If you have enough urgency, then you can do it differently. And you can see the approach that we took last year in the UK, which is a similar approach to other countries, where we said we'd really like to back a different set of modalities and make sure that one of these works. We said to ourselves, if we can get better than 50%, which was what WHO said as well, that'll be fantastic. Once we were into the 90s in terms of the percentage effectiveness of the vaccines, it suddenly changed the bar for everybody. And now vaccine companies, and I'll be dead interested in listening to Fabian's view on this as well from Sanofi Pasteur's point of view, but if you look at the vaccine companies of the last 10 years and the research they were doing, quite often that would be about pandemic preparedness, but it would be very much government-led. It would be very much the governments of the world putting their hands in their pockets and saying, we'd like you to develop this. Actually, what Moderna and Pfizer have shown is that you can really drive a commercial advantage out of being good at what you do and having a technology that you can then commercialize and scale up and bring to market. And I think that's going to change the playing field. In a way, it brings it in line with some of the other parts of our industry, which were already doing that kind of thing, of seeing unmet medical needs and actually moving them very quickly through the development path. Here we've done it for real on the global scale. I think the next issue, though, is that what we've got in the 12 months we've had since last September is countries have gone through the emotion of being in a position where, first of all, had they got access to the successful vaccine? Then when they saw that the access to the successful vaccine was being had by others, perhaps, that we started to react in a way in which perhaps was not as collaborative as we would have liked to have said we would be as a global community. And we've been left with a situation where now we can talk very nicely from the situation that we're in, sat in Montreal or in London or in New York. But if you see the world from Africa, or if you see the world from South America, or you see the world from some parts of our own communities as well, it's not as good as we're making it out to be. And I think that's another challenge that we've got in this next 2 years of dealing with COVID. The reason I highlighted what Takashi said about Medicago is that technology, in a sense, is one of those technologies that when we looked last summer at promising technologies that might give us a solution going forward, plant-based technologies was absolutely one of them that we looked at. mRNA moved much forward, much quicker than we expected it to do. Had it been any slower, I think that the world would have been a bit different in terms of some of the things that we've done at pace in other areas. But that's the word, I think. This industry now understands it can move at speed, it can be ready. What we mustn't do is lose any of the lessons learned that we've got now and throw away the playbook of what we've learned how to do in the last 18 months. Because the next health emergency will absolutely need us, not only to do that, but to do it collaboratively. And so I'll stop there because I think there's a conversation we could have around that. But I think that's, for me, those are the couple of things I'd take out of what happened in the last 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Steve, for that. And this idea that if we have enough urgency, we can move in a different way. So exciting. Yeah. So I'm going to turn to Jessica Chutter. So Jessica, based on your experience with international investments, how do you see Canada becoming a premier destination for international companies looking to set up biomanufacturing facilities? In your opinion, could Canada do more to incentivize these companies and attract more foreign direct investments?
Great. Well, thanks very much, Joanne. You know, I guess really stepping back, it's really important to talk about the innovation that was just touched on from both a technology and from a new drug class. I think we've really seen through COVID the importance of innovation, and there's really a broad now drive with respect to precision oncology, gene therapy, genetic engineering, and cell therapy, RNA medicines, et cetera. It's a plethora of activity. And importantly, I think also what we've seen over the past 18 months is that science is borderless, capital is borderless. And so in terms of ultimately success, whether it starts in Canada or elsewhere, the ramifications are global in terms of those successes. And frankly, investors have seen the same thing. So over the past 2 years, the public markets have actually raised $100 billion for public biotech companies. That is just incredible. We've never seen that, but there is for now, importantly, a very, very big source of public investments that complement government funding to be able to support what was really a new business model in biotech, which is one that starts with platform, so a new technology, a new class of drugs, and then allows for the production of a renewable pipeline. Whether the companies sit in Canada or in other parts of the world, the United States, which has been a focus, frankly, we have the core from an innovation standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, experience, and now the capital that was frankly lacking before because of this borderless nature is really being able to come in to our community. And I think that is really important. I mean, the sources of capital, again, historically have been the public, have been pharmaceuticals in terms of partnerships, and then government. And I think we've seen all of that happen in Canada in terms of whether it's, Moderna yesterday announced a partnership with Accelera. So there you've got the partnership to partnership in terms of emboldening. We had obviously the federal government in terms of their sponsorship of manufacturing with Moderna. And I think what's important is that manufacturing is not to be viewed in isolation. It is a critical success factor in terms of the success of a company ultimately developing a drug, okay? The company has the decision in terms of whether they have that manufacturing in-house or whether it is outsourced. Outsourcing itself has become a huge industry, over $10 billion in revenue generated from what we call CDMO, or contract development manufacturing organizations. And so a company has a decision as to whether they want to control the manufacturing or outsource it. Manufacturing is always a challenging one in terms of capital commitment because it is typically required ahead of some of the clinical inflection points. And that's why you need strategic partnerships. That's why you need government support to be able to basically lean in from a risk profile standpoint so that you have the ability to be quick in terms of accelerating drug development. I think we've got now great examples of Canadian companies that have attracted global investments. And importantly, we're also seeing the successes of that in terms of their cooperation and collaboration on a global basis. So again, the community here with respect to academics, universities, hospitals, and industry is now really getting organized well in terms of bundling all this scientific innovation and seeing it, basically from a commercialization standpoint, very successfully.
Thanks so much, Jessica. So I'm going to turn now to Fabrizio Moreno from Sanofi. So Fabian, with the successful launch of the government's biomanufacturing and life sciences strategy, what do you think is most critical to ensure success in implementation? What more can Canada do to develop a globally competitive life sciences sector that is attractive from an investment perspective?
Thanks, Joanne, for the question. And very, very interesting to hear Steve, Takashi, and Jessica's point of view here. First, the strategy, the biomanufacturing strategy, life science strategy, we believe is sound. It's an end-to-end approach. It's a fantastic start. For people in my industry, it's literally a dream come true. And what we need to refine is the long-term strategy. How do we keep the momentum? Right now, we've given a boost to the industry, and how do we keep it up? A key word will be around critical mass. My point of view comes from the large scale, the industrial, the big machine that makes millions and millions and millions of doses of whatever product. biomanufacturing is a rare and precious commodity. Countries right now all over the world are fighting to establish some kind of, to bolster their industry. There are many factors that go into deciding where a large company, let's say like Sanofi, should put their facilities, their infrastructure. Canada, when you start going through the list of countries around the world and where should the company invest when there's an opportunity to invest, Canada scores, when you do the analysis, Canada, we score a lot of points. Okay, stable economy, stable government, great health regulatory agencies like Health Canada, recognized worldwide with the talent. We're starting to get the know-how, but we fall short in some key areas. One disadvantage that Canada has to attract the big investments is that we're a small country. Wow, we're a big country, but we're small. We're a small market size. We have a small market size. And picture Canada as a triathlete. Okay, so if you're going to be a slow runner, you better dominate and compensate with your swimming and your biking. Right now, we have a small market in Canada, and that slows us down. And at the moment, through incentive, the great government incentives, the program, the ISEP programs, etc., we're able to compensate with these incentives and be able to become more attractive. But to really win this and really make sure that there's a long-term the implementation long-term is done properly, there is one thing that we need to pay attention to is the fair valuation of the innovation in Canada. And that's not always the case. Sometimes we try to save a penny and then we leave $1 on the table. Simply to become attractive for the long term, for large, to bring those biomanufacturing investments in Canada, we need to be able to develop it here, okay? Well, we don't have to, but we definitely need to be able to make it here. But importantly, we need to be able to sell it here at a fair valuation. And great agencies like I said and our Ministry of Health need to continue working together and go even push that conversation even further to ensure that the bigger picture is covered. You know, everybody wins. You build the critical mass. You attract, the rest of the world sees, hey, something's going on in Canada that makes sense. Maybe we should take a look too. You start feeding the talent pipeline. Canadians benefit from the innovation first. Better standard of care, better patient outcomes, less hospitalization, more skilled jobs, more export revenues, more tax revenues. The benefits go on and on. And I think that's a key piece. And then just to build on, I'll just close here, and just to build on what Jessica was saying, she mentioned something extremely important around the risk that companies face when they try to bring a product to market around building a facility or investing ahead. And we've seen multiple examples where sometimes you spend hundreds of millions of dollars and the product doesn't pan out the way it had been predicted. So one thing also that Canada could do in the long term is, and we're starting to do it more and more, is create opportunities to reduce that risk. And it could be simply through CMOs, as Jessica was mentioning, or facilities like the Biomanufacturing Center in Montreal that's being built. Or it could be incentives like, hey, if you're gonna make it here, you can sell it here. We'll ensure that whatever innovation that you bring to Canada will be valued at a fair price, and we guarantee that your product will be sold in market. And anyway, those are some thoughts. I'd love to hear what everybody else is thinking. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Fabien. Those important ideas about how much we've done, and yet we're a small market, and how do we deal with that? That's the Canadian situation. Yeah. Very, very important points. So at this point, we have some time for audience questions. There aren't any right now, so audience members, you're free to send in your questions, and we can ask them. In the meantime, let's turn to the panelists. Are there any particular points that other panelists have raised that you would like to further comment on? Steve, Jessica, Takashi, or Fabian? Steve, go ahead.
I'd like to raise, just build on the risk piece on biomanufacturing, because I think all of us that lived through the last 20 years, 9/11 happened and there was an anthrax attack and there was a tremendous look at bioterrorism and how do we prepare ourselves against bioterrorism. By the end of the decade, and this is a real paraphrase of it, but by the end of the decade, perhaps the recognition that it was an important area started to wane a bit as successive administrations inherited the budgets that they had to spend, and medical countermeasures became the sort of way of looking at it. And there was a view that flu pandemic was something that we really, really should be prepared against. And so quite a lot of money was spent at the early part of the last decade, getting certainly the US ready for a flu pandemic. And I think one of the issues we've got is the models with which you keep pandemic surge capacity ready. So I think as we're all looking at onshoring in our countries, there is an issue about you can't have multiple small pandemic ready capabilities around the world all empty just waiting for something to happen. We've got to have a better model than that. And I think some of the shared risk that you can do now in flexible biomanufacturing, because of the way in which the technologies are converging in the way you can make them, and the sort of the clean rooms that you can have, and then have flexible equipment to bring into them. There's a real opportunity for countries like Canada and others to create the ability to make in non-pandemic times products that enable you to have the capability on the ground such that in a health emergency, you can respond using whichever modality becomes the right modality to respond with. And I think that's something that both Jessica and Fabian have sort of mentioned, and I just wanted to build on that a little bit and say, I think this is a real opportunity for us. And I know there's always this in-source control piece for a major pharma in vaccines. But once again, I think that's a learning we've had from the last 18 months, is you can use a CMO and an in-house mix to meet a health emergency. And so there really is a strong, for the first time we've seen the Pfizers of this world recognizing that they've got to have a completely global network to supply the mRNA to the world. And that's used a mixture of CDMO and in-house capacity. And I think, so Fabian's point's a good one. I think we should be looking at in countries how you put them on the ground, but then you need the model of how you're going to operate them. It can't be government just sitting there waiting for the bad times. It's really got to be a real private government partnership here. And I think that there's funding models to be used here and best practice to be looked at. And I think it's a real area we should spend time as a community thinking how best to do it.
Thanks so much, Steve. So we're talking about this idea of the small market in Canada and this global context and of one ecosystem worldwide. And Jessica mentioned that science and capital are borderless. So how do you see what kind of emerging model might occur worldwide to allow collaboration, such as Steve mentioned, where we're mitigating risk together and not having multiple small countries with pandemic-ready processes? What might that look like? Have you had any success, Steve, in working with other countries to try and mitigate this risk across borders, or is this an emerging concept?
It's definitely emerging. I think one of the issues is it needs to be born out of collaboration rather than protectionism. Mm-hmm. I think there's a real issue. If you look back at another lesson learned is protectionism just drives us all downwards. It doesn't enhance the ability as a globe to respond. So I think you've got to be looking at this in a collaborative way. And so some of the bigger, the CEPIs and the Gavis and the WHO sponsored ideas are worthy of looking at how we make them more effective, but also there's room for bilateral work. And I really love Jessica's point about borderless capital and borderless science. We've seen that so much here that you know, in a way, the scientists and the capital markets have taught us that the world is connected and that you can get this done. And I think that's the piece we've got to do. We've got to get that bit right.
I think the other thing that's really important is that you can't have like manufacturing in a vacuum. And again, there should be collaboration across the spectrum in terms of the innovations that we've seen during this pandemic, for example, in development. And obviously the UK has been fabulous there in terms of the multi-arm clinical trials, which again, I think can be done. They're not just UK-based products that were being conducted. So there can be really, you have to integrate all this innovation that's occurred with respect to development. And then on the discovery side, I mean, if we think of like just the advances that are being made in AI drug discovery, where Canada is really at a leadership, right? And so then integrate that with the manufacturing. This is all going to ultimately, hopefully, de-risk everything, but it has to be coordinated. It can't be, okay, we just invest in a couple of manufacturing plants. It really needs to be broader, as I think, you know, we have started to do in terms of the science and the people and the manufacturing together. And I guess, you know, the theme that we're talking about, and I hate to use it, frankly, but we really have to realize that we're in an endemic, and this is not a pandemic. This is here to stay. And how we address it, I agree that there's going to be ups and downs in terms of urgent need, but in terms of how we deal with whether it's coronaviruses or infectious disease, et cetera, it's going to require massive coordination and not just knee-jerk reactions.
And Joanna, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Yeah, and can I just extend Jessica's list and add regulatory to that? Because I think the way the regulators have responded has been awesome. You know, I think they've rewritten again, very experienced players have done this, and that's why I think the public can feel safe here. You know, again, this time last year, everyone was saying, if you rush to get a vaccine out, will we be unsafe? Well, look at the live trial we've done on however many billion people now, and look at how safe it is. So we've proven it can be done, and that's parallel activities, rolling submissions, ways in which you can really get the time through the regulator condensed. And that, I think, along with clinical trials, along with all the list that we're generating as we're talking, I think that's been just a real shout out to the regulators here.
Agreed.
Here, 24/7 in my experience. So Fabian Moreno or Takashi Nago, do you have any other comments on those points?
Yeah, well, if I may, great point, thank you. So World Pandemic Preparedness, we believe that Medicago is one of the few pure play pandemic preparedness company. And it's been the theme since the inception of a company 20 years ago. All of a sudden, pandemic preparedness has gained such an awareness because of the COVID. But I have to say, and as has been pointed out, the goal of our enterprise is to contain the pandemic and keeping the pandemic from becoming endemic. It's a very difficult business model to be funded by private sectors because the need is unpredictable, and when the needs emerges, it's like a bolus need. We need to develop the vaccine rapidly, produce enormous amount rapidly, without really knowing how long the pandemic is going to last. And our mission is to contain it as quickly as possible, potentially to eradicate. So this is where the challenge comes into play in terms of how do we get the funding, sustainable business model financially, and then perhaps figure out a way to distribute equally our vaccines being produced in rapid pace globally, as well as redistribute the capital that's being raised in this phase so that we can be sustainable in the long term. And it's not clear. I mean, our goal is to stop the pandemic, and if we do that, I mean, where's the capital coming from? So I just wanted to share this live experience of a company that is living on the theme of pandemic preparedness and challenges.
Thank you, Takashi.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Takashi. And I think Takashi just illustrated what the real challenge is. It's if you anywhere. The pandemic will go away at some point, right? In 2 years, probably, hopefully 3 years. COVID will beat COVID. We'll move on. What happens after? Will there be a need to for all these facilities that have been built all over the world? All this capacity has been created. What will happen to all those facilities? Will we be able to maintain them? It's extremely expensive to keep a plant what we call hot, warm. When you're not using it, and that's I think it's part of the challenge. I mean, we're very focused on the pandemic, of course. We're living it. It's hot. It's right now. I think for us in Canada, for the long term, the life science strategy, biomanufacturing strategy, we have to immediately start looking at what's going to happen in 5, 10, 15 years. What is this going to look like? Pandemic preparedness is a different topic. It's an important topic. It's a related topic, but it's a separate topic, in my opinion. I think they're related, they're separate. I think they need to be dealt independently and then with a certain level of connection. But if you're going to invest in biomanufacturing, and again, my point of view is, again, from the large scale, the industrial scale, the big machine that pumps, that makes billions of doses a year, if you're going to build it, you need to put something in it. You need to keep it running. Otherwise, this investment is just vaporized after a few years. And then you get back in this cycle of, we made a mistake. This was not a sound strategy. We're going to stop investing in biotech. We're going to focus on something else. And then you lose that momentum and you tend to forget. And that's, I'm not sure if that's what happened in Canada over the last 30 years. We have to be very careful not to repeat, to learn why this happened in the first place, why biotech was decimated in Canada over the last 30 years, and then how do we protect it going forward? And so it's an extraordinary problem. I believe we've got a lot of smart people in the country working on it right now. Let's make sure we do it right. And I think and of course you've got people like the people on this panel who have the experience and a little bit of knowledge around perhaps how we could help. But anyway, that's the way I see it. It's not easy to solve, but it's solvable.
I think, again, maybe just, as one thinks about things a little bit in isolation, I think historically, unfortunately, infectious disease has not been a great area from a public investment standpoint, meaning private investors, and because of the challenges there. And so I do think there needs to be a bias in terms of directing this capital towards ultimately what is going to be important for the greater good. But the good news here, and just to pick up on Fabien's point in terms of, again, we have broad technologies now that are at this point in time being directed towards the pandemic, whether it's a vaccine, whether it's a monoclonal antibody, et cetera. But I think the way these technologies are being set up, whether it's mRNA, monoclonal antibodies, et cetera, they have applicability in oncology. They have applicability across the spectrum of therapeutics. And so I think you're absolutely right. There needs to be that ability to toggle through the less pandemic times, if you will, in terms of keeping those facilities up to snuff with respect to that cutting edge technology. And I think, frankly, as these classes become more and more relevant, it'll be easier to do that, given that there will be, fortunately, products addressing other therapeutic needs. But I think there will always be a need for support on the infectious, antibiotics, et cetera. We're at like 50% resistance. They ultimately, most of them don't even work though, but there's no investment going in there because it's been so challenging from a regulatory standpoint. So I do feel there has to be a continued recognition that support has to go there to kind of maintain your ability to be able to react quickly in these situations.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you so much. We're just about at the end of this wonderful session. I'd really like to thank our contributors to this session on rebuilding Canada's biomanufacturing and life sciences sector, Takashi Nago, Stephen Baksha, Jessica Chutter, Fabian Moreno. Thank you so much for giving us your time and for sharing your ideas of Canada in this global context, for elevating our vision to how we can provide for our own peoples, yet consider our place in the world. These are wonderful ideas that will help with this new process of rebuilding and taking a place on the world stage. So I'd like to thank you all so much on behalf of Canada.